The phone buzzed on the granite countertop, the screen flashing with my daughter's college logo. It was a Tuesday. I remember the exact mundane scent of lemon cleaner in the air. Mom, her voice was thin, a frayed wire. The hospital just called. It's Liam. They think it's leukemia. In that suspended second, my world didn't shatter, it inverted. All my instincts screamed to go, to hold her, to fix it. But my hand, still damp from wiping the counter, froze midair because I knew the first call I had to make wasn't to book a flight, but to beg for the money to buy the ticket. My name is Evelyn. For 32 years, I was the family anchor. My husband, Robert, and I built a comfortable, if not lavish, life in a quiet suburb of Cincinnati. We raised two children. Chloe, my fierce, brilliant daughter who moved to Seattle for a tech job, and Michael, my son, who never quite left, not in the bad way at first. He was the charmer, the one who could make my serious father laugh until he cried. After Robert passed from a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, the family dynamic quietly crystallized. My parents, Helen and Richard, lived an hour away in the upscale, gated community of Indian Hill. My father was a retired cardiologist, my mother the queen of their meticulously decorated manor. Their love was generous, but it had conditions, a subtle hierarchy I'd accepted as the natural order. Michael, the only grandson, the bearer of the family name, was the sun in their solar system. His struggles, a failed restaurant venture, some credit card debt, were temporary setbacks. My steadiness, Chloe's independence were just expected. The moral fault line wasn't carved by cruelty, but by a deep, unexamined entitlement. When my father helped Michael buy a fixer-upper with what he called a family loan, I was happy for my son. When he mentioned over a Christmas dinner that he'd added Michael as a cosigner on a large investment account for his future, I felt a twinge but brushed it aside. That's just how they are, I told myself. They want to take care of him. I didn't see it then as the careful construction of a moat with Michael safely inside and Chloe and me on the outside, presumed to be forever self-sufficient. My own security was modest. The paid-off house, my teacher's pension, and a small nest egg Robert and I had saved. It was enough for me, or so I thought. Then my grandson Liam got sick. Chloe's world was collapsing 3,000 miles away. Liam, only 4, was facing a brutal 2-year treatment protocol. Her insurance was good, but the out-of-pocket costs were staggering. The non-medical costs were a nightmare. Lost income as she took leave, temporary relocation near the specialty hospital, special foods, parking, everything. I emptied my savings account to send her the first $15,000. It was every spare penny I had. It's a start, my love, I told her, my voice cracking over the phone. We'll figure out the rest. I hung up and looked at my budget. The rest didn't exist, so I did the thing I'd never done before. I drove to my parents' house not for a social visit, but as a supplicant. Their sunroom was bathed in afternoon light. I laid it out calmly, the numbers, the prognosis, the sheer scale of the need. I wasn't asking for a gift, but for a loan against the equity in my home. I had papers drawn up. I would pay every cent back with interest. My mother listened, her face a mask of sympathetic concern. My father stroked the arm of his leather chair. Evelyn, he said, his voice the one he used for complicated diagnoses. This is a tremendous burden for you, for Chloe, he sighed, but we have to be prudent. The market is volatile. Tapping your home equity at your age is risky, and with Michael's situation still so unstable, Michael, I asked, confused. His new business line of credit, my mother chimed in softly. We co-signed just last month. It's a substantial commitment. We have to protect our liquidity for family emergencies. The word hung in the air, toxic and heavy. My grandson fighting for his life was not a family emergency to the same degree as my son's business credit line. Please, I whispered, the dignity I'd carried in with me beginning to dissolve. He's 4 years old. My father stood up, the meeting clearly over. We'll write Chloe a check for 5,000 as a gift, no strings. But that's the extent of what we can do. You need to be strong, Evelyn. Chloe needs you to be rational. I drove home in a silent daze. The check arrived 2 days later. It felt less like help and more like a dismissal. In my family's eyes, my grandson's survival was a line item to be debated, while my brother's ambitions were a sacred blank check. The betrayal metastasized quietly in 100 small ways. I took a second job, tutoring in the evenings. My house, once full of Robert's laughter and Chloe's childhood energy, became a shell I returned to only to sleep and calculate bills. I ate soup for dinner, tracking every dollar I could send west. Meanwhile, the updates from my parents were a study in cognitive dissonance. Michael's new patio furniture just arrived. It really makes the backyard pop for entertaining, my mother would say during our weekly strained call. I'd stare at the invoice on my table for Liam's last ambulance transfer, a bill Chloe had forwarded in a moment of overwhelmed panic. The social pressure was a subtle, suffocating blanket. At a cousin's wedding shower, surrounded by the warm buzz of family, my aunt pulled me aside. I heard about little Liam, she said, squeezing my hand. It's just awful. But you know, your parents are getting older. They have to think of Michael's future, his stability. A man needs to stand on his own 2 feet. You and Chloe, you're so capable. The subtext was clear. Our capability disqualified us from needing support. The loneliest moment came on a Tuesday night. I was exhausted from 8 hours of teaching, followed by 3 hours of tutoring. I opened my laptop to video call Chloe in Liam's hospital room. He was pale, connected to tubes, but he managed a weak smile. Hi, Nana. I told him a silly story, my heart breaking. After we hung up, an email notification popped up. It was a forwarded message from my father to Michael, which my sister in law, confused, had sent to me by mistake. The subject line, Ray, investment property down payment. I didn't open it, I didn't need to. The mere title, sitting there in my inbox while my grandson fought for his life in a sterile room, was the final, clarifying insult. The private cost was no longer just financial. It was the erosion of my very place in the family story. I was not the valued matriarch, but a utility, reliable, expected to manage, and ultimately expendable. The shift came through an act of simple kindness. My neighbor, Ben, was a retired estate attorney. He'd seen the extra car in my driveway from my tutoring student, noticed the light on in my study late into the night. One Saturday, he came over with a plate of cookies. Evelyn, he said gently, after the usual pleasantries faded, you look like you're carrying the world. Is it just Liam or is something else going on? I broke down. I told him everything, the loan refusal, the second job, the forwarded email about the investment property. I showed him the loan papers I'd drawn up for my parents, now crumpled in a drawer. He listened, his eyes growing steadily more grave. May I? He asked, gesturing to the papers. He scanned them, then looked up. Evelyn, when your father passed, did he have a will? Of course, I said. Everything went to my mother. She updated her will after that. She told us it was divided between Michael and me. Did you ever see that updated will? Ben asked, his tone careful, neutral. A cold trickle of understanding began. No. She said it was all handled. She said not to worry. Ben leaned forward. It might be nothing, but sometimes in these situations, handled can mean a lot of things, and that loan document you prepared, it's excellent. It shows clear intent, a formal request. It establishes a record. He paused. Your father was a doctor, meticulous. Did he keep a home office, files? I remembered the walnut paneled study, a room we were seldom allowed to enter as children. Yes, the realization wasn't about finding a villain, but about understanding the game board. I had been playing by the rules of family sentiment while they were operating in the realm of cold, hard assets. For the first time, I saw the power imbalance not as a fact of life, but as a structure, and structures can be examined. There was no explosion, only a deep, still resolve. I thanked Ben, not asking for more, but absorbing the lesson. I would not beg, I would not scream, I would simply seek the truth and act on it. My plan was methodical, dignified. First, I started a journal. I documented every interaction, dates of my requests, their refusals, the amounts I'd sent Chloe, the bills I was covering. I printed the email about the investment property without opening it and filed it. I made copies of the loan proposal they'd rejected. This wasn't for a lawsuit, it was for me to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. Next, I reached out to a different kind of ally. My cousin, a gentle but no nonsense financial advisor. Over coffee, I laid out the broad strokes. I need to understand my options, I said. If my mother's will is not as represented, I need to know what, if any, legal or financial recourse I might have for the support I'm providing my daughter. Not to attack, but to protect us. She nodded. The key, she said, is information. You have a right to know the contents of any trust or will where you are a named beneficiary. A polite written inquiry from you, or eventually from an attorney, is perfectly within your rights. The final piece was timing. I learned from Michael in one of his boastful calls that my parents were hosting a large 50th wedding anniversary party for themselves in 2 months. It was to be a grand affair at the country club, a celebration of their legacy. I decided that would be my deadline. I would gather my information, send my polite, formal inquiries to my mother's attorney, and seek a quiet mediation after the party. I would not spoil their celebration, but I would no longer let their celebration be built on a foundation of my silent subsidization. My goal wasn't to take from Michael. It was to secure a fair share, not for me, but for Liam's fight, to make the invisible labor of care visible on a balance sheet. The anniversary party was a spectacle of familial success. The country club ballroom glittered. My mother, in a silver gown, held court. My father beamed, toasting their enduring partnership and the family they built. I wore a simple black dress, a quiet anchor in the sea of champagne and laughter. Midway through the evening, my father took the microphone. His voice, proud and warm, filled the room. Helen and I have been blessed, he began. He spoke of legacy, of providing for the future. Then he gestured to Michael. And we are so thrilled to continue that legacy. As a symbol of our faith in the next generation, we have finalized the gift of the lake house to Michael and his family. May it be a place of joy for them for years to come. A wave of applause. Michael grinned, accepting backslaps, the lake house. A property I'd assumed was part of the collective family trust, a place we all loved. As the applause died down, I felt a profound calm. I walked to the small stage, not with aggression, but with a steady grace. I took the microphone from my surprised father. What a beautiful gift, I said, my voice clear and carrying. The room hushed, curious. Congratulations, Michael. I turned to my parents, their smiles now fixed. A legacy is a wonderful thing to pass on. It's interesting the choices we make about what constitutes that legacy. I paused, meeting my mother's eyes. For the last 18 months, my legacy has been a fight for my grandson's life. A fight I've waged alone, financially, because when I asked for help with a formal loan offer with papers, I was told the family's liquidity was committed elsewhere. You could hear a pin drop. The festive atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable silence. I'm not here to make a scene, I continued, still calm. I'm here to make an observation. Legacy isn't just property, it's values. It's what you prioritize. And this week, my attorney will be sending a formal inquiry to review the trusts and wills because I need to understand what resources, if any, are there for Liam's care so I can plan accordingly. I wished I could have done this privately, but since the distribution of assets is now being celebrated publicly, I felt the truth of my exclusion should be just as clear. The power didn't shift with an argument, but with the deafening, public exposure of their hypocrisy. The glittering facade of the perfect family cracked, not because I attacked it, but because I simply held up a mirror. The mediation was brief and somber. Faced with the journal, the documents, and the undeniable public relations disaster, my parents' lawyer advised a settlement. There was no dramatic reading of a will that disinherited me. It was more nuanced, with trusts heavily favoring Michael. We avoided court. They agreed to a one-time, substantial disbursement from the estate, structured as an early inheritance for me, specifically earmarked to cover Liam's medical debts and create a care fund. I accepted. It wasn't vengeance. It was justice, a correction. The aftermath is a landscape of respectful distance. I see my parents on major holidays. The conversations are polite, shallow, like interacting with diplomatic acquaintances. Michael has the lake house. I have peace, and Liam, thank God, is in remission. The moral of this real life story wasn't about getting even. It was about a slow, painful awakening. Sometimes the family you're born into is a context, not a covenant. And the most profound strength you can find is the courage to renegotiate the terms of your own belonging, not from a place of anger, but from a place of unshakable self respect. If this emotional story about family, boundaries, and quiet strength resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. For more calm, reflective drama from real life, consider subscribing. Thank you for listening.